Good morning, good day, good evening. Welcome to BattlefieldOne Podcast, where we talk about Battlefield and only Battlefield. My name is Tom, aka the Lanky Soldier, and hopefully all Battlefield players will be interested and entertained by today's show. So this is episode 2, and today we're going to be discussing the state of Battlefield. The current situation, the positives, the negatives, what's happening with Battlefield, just to analyze what's happening with the franchise at the moment, see if we can go through some history lessons and see if we can learn anything from that, see what's the future holds and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to be discussing that, and hopefully you're going to enjoy that. And this is episode 2, as I mentioned. So if you're a new listener and you had no idea what this podcast is about, well, hello, my name's Tom, and we talk Battlefield here. And this is a reboot show from 2015, so technically this is episode 44, but on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you're listening this podcast from, this is episode 2, or a proper episode 1. I know, it's confusing, but it's a reboot of the show, and this is basically episode 2, and if you want to be, caught up with all the context, with all the, what happened with this podcast, the history, whatever, I do recommend to listen to episode 1 of this podcast, as you can find on Spotify, iTunes, or Amazon Music, wherever you're listening to the podcast. You can, listen to the first episode, get some context if you're really, really curious. Of course, you're not going to get lost if you're going to, listen to this podcast, this episode 2. You're not going to be lost because we're just going to talk about Battlefield. It's not like you need, context, but a bit more context regarding the podcast. If you really care, it's always nice, I presume. So if you're want to understand the history behind this podcast, what are the goals and everything, please do listen to episode 1 and then come back to this one and see if, this podcast is for you. And I hope this is going to be for you because it takes a while to make these podcasts and prepare the notes and everything. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. So, yeah. So today we're going to talk about the state of Battlefield. And before we continue, we do have time codes in the description of this podcast, of this particular episode. So if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, you don't have the time or whatever that may be, we have time codes. So if you want to listen to one particular topic or one particular thing in this particular episode, you can always go into the description, click on the time code, click on the topic or time you want to listen, and enjoy. So if you don't have the time to listen to everything, you can always go to use the time codes in the description. And follow our, socials, Twitter. We do have, the only thing we have Twitter right now is, that's the only thing we have right now. But if you want to follow me personally on my YouTube channel or whatever, so it's in the description. So just type the Lanky Soldier and you'll find me anywhere. Like I'm pretty much everywhere. So if you want to follow me personally, but if you want to follow the podcast Twitter, it's in the description. Follow it. It's not much is happening, but we just mostly post when the show is up and whatever. So because it's not like we have a really tight schedule right now. So it's always nice to know when the next episode is up. But but if you're a fan of the show, like if you want to support the channel, not my channel, but just like you want to support the show, you want to support my channel, all that kind of stuff, support me as a content creator when I'm posting these podcasts. And I'm also a host of Live Gaming Gathering podcast, which you also can find on Spotify, iTunes, and Amazon Music, and basically everywhere, and YouTube. But if you want to support the podcast, support this show and help me make this show better, or, just keep going, basically, because I still have to pay the bills, but there's no pressure. So if you want to support the podcast, go on patreon.com/TheLankySoldier, and if you support on Patreon, which is the cheapest tier on that Patreon we have right now, you will get 1 week of early access to this particular podcast, which is the BattlefieldOne podcast. So if you're feeling like supporting the channel, just $2 a month, get early access to the show by a week. Please support us, and help us, grow and so on, and improve the podcast. Let us know the feedback and everything. So, also, if you're more interested in not only the Battlefield franchise, but you're just interested in gaming in general, or just some good content, we do have a lot of extra content right now on the Patreon. So just right now, like 5+ hours of content, just minimum right now. So if you want to support the podcast, you want to support the channel, you want to support, my whole content creation, please do check out, support us and get that extra content that we actually make for you. It takes a while. And thank you for all the patrons that are already supporting us and supporting the cause, the content creation we make. It's really lovely, and thank you so much, guys, for supporting. And I'm glad you enjoyed the last episodes, because it really means a lot to us. And of course, if you don't want to do any of that, you can always support this podcast by leaving a rating on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music. I don't know if Amazon Music has rating system, but I know iTunes has it, and I know that Spotify has it. But I think it's only on the mobile versions of Spotify, I think. Regardless, if you can leave a rating on the podcast or of this show and so on, please do, so I can, it can help other people to find the podcast, and we get more listeners and so on. And it's always nice to have more listeners and promote the podcast. It does help, so please do leave a rating. So yeah, today we're gonna talk about the state of Battlefield. And if you know me, if you've been following my YouTube channel for years, and you've been following me on the socials, you probably know how I feel about Battlefield 2042. It's not a really positive feeling I have regarding this game, and especially when I've been playing Battlefield for so many years, like more than a decade at this point. It's kind of disappointing to be in the state where Battlefield 2042 is right now, even though it's getting a lot of positive feedback from the latest patches and the seasons and everything, the map remakes. Finally the game has classes. It does a lot of things. A lot of positive things happened to this game since its horrible launch almost 2 years ago. It's nice to know that it's getting some positive feedback, but at the same time, it's not really, fixing the main problem of the game. It's like the negativity is already there, regardless how many bugs or fixes, you do to the game. It's still a really negative experience to a lot of people. But of course, I'm not gonna be talking about just negatives today and everything, because no. There's a lot of good things happened with Battlefield 2042 and the whole franchise in general. There's some lessons to be learned. A lot of good things happened, and I hope DICE will learn from those lessons. And I want to talk about the positives and negatives, and just what's the actual state of this franchise. Because if you're not familiar with the Battlefield franchise has been struggling for a little bit for a couple of years, for a couple of games. So it's kind of sad the way Battlefield 2042 came out, how it launched and everything, and I'm glad it's getting a lot of positive feedback right now. But sometimes you just think, is it a little bit too late? Which is of course standard by DICE and Battlefield games at this point, because they come out rough, but they start fixing it, and then it kind of is kind of good at the end as they cut support for the game. But anyway, the whole premise of this particular episode is gonna be that PC Game article. So basically, there was an article that came out in PC Gamer by Morgan Park, and the title of that article is, here's the thing, Battlefield 2042 is really good now. And of course, I read the article. I'm not gonna read the whole article to you guys, because I don't think there's any point. But the point is, the whole premise of this article is basically saying, yeah, the game was bad when it came out, but with current updates, with positive, changes to the game, to the gameplay, classes, the maps, the map redesigns, all that kind of stuff, it made the game good finally. It's finally the game that was supposed to be out 2 years ago. This is the game that DICE was supposed to release at that time. So that's the article, basically praising the game, like, yeah, it's not a shit game anymore, which is great. It's great that there's positive feedback coming from outside the Battlefield community saying, hey, Battlefield 2042 is a good game right now and you should play it. That's outside the Battlefield community. And of course, a lot of developers from DICE, retweeted that article. Every bloody developer that is on social media retweeted that article, basically saying, oh, it's fantastic, we worked really hard, it's great and everything, which is great. I'm glad the developers are taking, the credit for their hard work of fixing the game. That's really good. But the problem is, you're kind of getting praise for basically doing bare minimum that was supposed to be in the first place. I'm glad that developers have been acknowledged that they've been working hard to fix the game. That's a good thing. But at the end of the day, you're not really... You released a broken game in the first place. You released a game that was in a really horrible state. Horrible performance, lack of content. The gameplay was basically bad. It was I dare to say it was the worst Battlefield game that came out since Battlefield Hardline. And Hardline wasn't that bad. But the problem with Battlefield Hardline was, it was just a different... It wasn't like... I don't know how to describe it. It's just like... It didn't feel like a Battlefield game. It was like mostly game design decisions that did not make the game... It did not make the game fun. But that's the point. The Hardline came out in a good state, but it's just like it wasn't a fun game, which is a completely different story with Battlefield 2042. The Battlefield 2042, when it came out, it wasn't good, it wasn't fun, performance was crap, lack of content, and there's lack of features, or quality of life features. Like, for example, there was no squad management. As I'm recording this video, as I'm recording this audio podcast. To this day, there's still no squad management. They acknowledge that they will be introducing squad management into the game. It's happening, but as I'm recording to this day, which is 31st of March 2023, there's still no squad management system in the game. So it's nice to know that developers are getting praise for fixing the game, but the way these developers, with all due respect to them, the way they took it, and every single developer that is on social media basically retweeted that article saying, we did good. Like, we did amazing. You should play this game and so on. And if I was a developer, I'm glad that my work is acknowledged. But if I know that I released a piece of shit, back then, and basically everyone hated me for releasing that piece of shit, and now being praised for fixing my piece of shit, well, I released a piece of shit. I don't think I should be getting praise for fixing that piece of shit. You see what I mean? And I talked to certain developers, that work in the game and so on. We personally, people that really engage in social media, they were quiet for obvious reasons, because why would they, be engaged in that, nonsense? We're glad that we're being acknowledged for fixing the game, but at the end of the day, we're just fixing the game. We're not improving the game or whatever, we're fixing it. So the way that article was shared everywhere really left a really bad taste in my mouth. Just I'm glad you're enjoying your hard work and you've been getting the recognition, but the optics are not there. The game came out really bad state, and it should not came out in that state in the first place. So it's easy. It's a really interesting thing to observe how you can spin articles like that into a really positive light, basically saying, yeah, the Battlefield 2042 was not perfect, but now it's really amazing, and so on. And as a Battlefield player myself, that I've been playing for many years, I appreciate all the different changes that happened with 2042. They're really good changes. Don't get me wrong, those are really good changes. A lot of quality of life improvements, classes are back, there was some content added. The maps got, redesigned, and the new maps are really great. I don't know if you can hear the rain happening in the background right now. I have no idea if the microphone is picking up, but anyway, I have a really interesting ceiling, that window ceiling, so rain gets really loud here. But anyway, I'm glad the game is getting positive changes to make the game more fun. But to this day, as I still sometimes play Battlefield 2042 just to see what's happening with the game, with the franchise and everything, and what kind of changes they introduced, and sometimes finish at least half of my battle pass in the game. It's still not a good game. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's in a tolerable state right now. It's in a tolerable state, but I still do not like the game. I still do not like the shooting mechanics. I do not like the movement. I'm still not a fan of certain other stuff in the game. And the list is really long and I can talk for hours. But anyway, I'm already kind of going too fast regarding this. Because first I want to talk about the positives about Battlefield 2042. And Battlefield 2042, even though it came out in a really shitty, horrible state, it was not acceptable. Like, hell no, it was acceptable on any terms you can think of. But it did some good things that other games don't do it. And I hope that these changes, these features, whatever they may be, will be transferred to the next game in some shape or form, improved or whatever. Because there's a lot of good things that Battlefield 2022 did that other games have not. And it's just, I really want to discuss those positives. And as I'm trying to find my bloody notes, here we go, fine. So basically, one of the positives before I continue, I did ask Reddit what the positives they think Battlefield 42 did. And Reddit being Reddit, it's always really interesting to see what kind of opinions you're gonna get. Because Reddit is really, obviously, really famous for being really negative about everything. But at the same time, I'm not blaming them, because they have the right to complain about something that is not good, and they have the right to complain about. And I don't think anyone should dismiss that as being negative. They're just speaking the truth. So I did ask the Reddit, Battlefield subreddit, what are some of the things that Battlefield 2042 got right? And the first thing I mentioned was that you could buy individual pieces of the bundles from the store. So, for example, I know, the first thing I talk about is the microtransactions, right? Oh wow, well, the gaming industry is quite something these days. No, but it's one of the examples I gave it to them, so people can give me some more examples of what Battlefield 2042 did right. So my first example was basically that you can buy, an individual piece of the bundle from the store instead of buying the whole bundle, which is more expensive. So, for example, in Call of Duty Warzone, since Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2.19, every game since then, there's no pay-to-win mechanics or, purchases, whatever. It's all cosmetics. But the way they sell cosmetics is in bundles. So you could never buy, an individual piece from that bundle unless you buy the whole bundle. So, let's say you want this particular skin that is, really cool and everything, but it costs $16, 17, $18, I don't know what's in dollars, but in UK, British pounds, that would be I don't know, 14, 15 pounds. So, if you want to buy that skin, it will cost you 15, 16 British pounds. And with that, you're gonna get all the other stuff in the bundle. So you're gonna get your banners, you're gonna get your weapon skins, your blueprints, emblems, something else, whatever that may be. And the way Battlefield does it has the same bundle system where you can you get a skin and you get some extra stuff around it, and that will be kind of the same price. But you can buy individual pieces from that particular bundle instead of buying the whole bundle, which is fantastic, which just gives you more options, more choice, how you want to approach and how you want to, spend your money on cosmetics. And I wish Call of Duty did that, because the way Call of Duty does it is really expensive and really annoying. Because, for example, sometimes I want to buy a small thing from that particular bundle, but I can't. I have to pay the full price for the whole bundle. While Battlefield 2042, you can just buy the individual piece from the bundle, and it's of course cheaper. But of course, if you buy the whole thing, it's going to be cheaper overall. But sorry, as I'm drinking tea and talking, I might burp once in a while, so I'm sorry. So I'm glad Battlefield 2042 is giving me that option of buying the bundles, not the bundles, buying the individual pieces of the bundle, which makes it, it helps me, because I, for example, I don't want the rest of the stuff, but I do want that particular piece from the bundle, which is fantastic. So that was my first positive about Battlefield 2042. The top one from that Reddit post I posted is solo co-op mode. And I have to agree. Solo and co-op mode, playing against bots and everything, that was such a requested feature since, Battlefield 2 actually. Yeah, since Battlefield 2, which is 15, 17 years ago? More actually. Actually, if not 20, almost 20 years. 18 years. Yeah, holy shit. What does it come out? 2005? Yeah. So, just the idea that you can play against bots and just test your weapons, test your vehicles, or just unlock something. That's such an amazing thing, and every game should have that option. Because I understand, you just want to shoot. You don't have sometimes you just don't want to play against real players because reasons. When you play against real players, it's a completely different game, and bots are just bots. It's nothing really, it's not like they're gonna give you a really big challenge, but it will give you some sort of entertainment, and that's really important. So I'm glad they actually added that into the game, and that makes, again, creating options for the player, which is really good. And the second one was the plus system. I have mixed feelings about the plus system, mostly because there's some arguments that say that players should not be able to change their loadout during the game because of this particular class they selected, because it kind of defeats the urgency of designing the class for whatever particular reason you're aiming for. So if you want to be an anti-vehicle class, or you want to be a medic and so on, and when you can change the attachments on the weapon, some people argue that kind of defeats the purpose of the class system, even though all weapons are available for use to each class. I personally think it's a good thing. I personally think the plus system is a really nice thing that exists in the game. And I personally think it should... The way it works right now, I think it's a bit complicated. Not complicated, more like tedious, just because you have to select what attachments you want to have in that plus system, which is nice, but I don't really use the plus system that much, just because I'm like, I just don't care. I know we're talking about just 30 seconds of, dealing with, with attachments, to set everything up and you can use it. But I personally don't use the plus system that much, just because I don't really need to, because I already have the weapon I really need. And if I really need something else, I'll just change a weapon. If I need a long range weapon, I'll just change into a long range weapon. I don't need a assault rifle, then adding a scope might do something about it, but I don't know. It's such a minuscule thing, but at the end of the day, it does give options to the player, which is good. Someone mentioned that traversal tools like ziplines is a really good thing, and I have to agree. Ziplines is a really nice addition to the maps that creates a bit of speed and momentum when they're moving around these big maps, which is fantastic. And of course, someone mentioned that map remakes are really good. Yes, I agree. So, certain maps, of course, do not get improved they did not get improved with the remake. It's not a remake, more like a redesign or improvement, whatever you want to call it. Certain maps do not get that improvement. Like, they don't feel improved, but they are, but they're not. But it's just the design of the map, and I don't think you can fix much when the whole design of the map is like that. So I understand you can't redesign the whole thing from scratch, but I'm glad they did that, though, because no Battlefield, game ever did that, or any other video game in that matter decide, you know what, let's take our launch maps and keep redesigning them each season, and just keep improving the flow of the maps, which is unheard of in AAA games, especially multiplayer games like Call of Duty and Battlefield. It's unheard of. So when they decide to do that, it is a really positive thing, and the game does feel better with these redesigned maps. And someone also mentioned that held region is back. Battlefield 5 did not have held region. It had you had to like heal yourself with the med pack or something like that. There was no self-healing. Yeah, right. There was no healing in Battlefield 5, and people really hated that. And I kind of agree. Self-healing, hell regen is kind of needed in the Battlefield game, especially when it's like in arcade shooters like Battlefield. You do need to have that. It's one of those things that you should not be punished for not having a medic around you, because having a medic around you, that means you have to assume that you'll have a teammate that will be good enough and always heal you no matter what, which is always never the case. If you've been playing multiplayer games for many for many years or whatever, you would know that you should not ever rely on your teammates about stuff like that. So stuff like that should encourage the player to do more teamwork, because if you don't have health regen, you're basically being punished. But if you have health regen and you still have a medic around you that actually gives you health, that means you're going to be back into the fight sooner, which will give you advantage over the enemy players that don't have a good medic. That means because the other player has to wait until his health regen kicks in, and the enemy player has to wait for that. While you, having a good medic around you, you can go back into the fight faster and you can push on that enemy faster. So when people argue like, oh, Battlefield should not have health regen, no, you just don't understand what are the positives and negatives of that. It's one thing to punish a player, and it's another to encourage a player to be a medic. That's classes are back, of course. That's a really good positive. I mean, sure. When Battlefield 2042 came out, it was not specialists. It was not a good thing. Specialists were not a good thing. But I'm glad Battlefield classes, the typical Battlefield classes are back, even though they're, of course, then they kind of shoot in with the specialists, but that was kind of expected because it's a specialist as such a core, pillar of this game. You can't really remove specialists unless we redesign the whole game, which they won't, of course, because it would take too much time and effort. It's not worth it. So what they did is they put specialists into classes and kind of limit some abilities there and there. Is it perfect? Of course not, but it's still a better system than it was like the actual specialist system. I think that's a really positive change, and of course, I keep forgetting Battlefield Portal. Battlefield Portal is such an amazing thing. I think it should be the future of the next Battlefield game. And I did say on my other podcast, Live Gaming Gathering podcast, I did say to Ray, who's my co-host, my hot take is that Battlefield Portal will be the next game. The reason why Battlefield Portal is not getting any support, any big support or important support in Battlefield 2042 is because they realize that Battlefield Portal is a really amazing thing, and they should expand this to the next game. So they keep in all the best pieces about Battlefield Portal for the next game. So, because they can always come out, when they announce the next game, they can always say, Battlefield Portal is coming back, improved with these features. wherever those features are. Or maybe with more maps and more content and everything. We don't know. The possibilities, the potential is insane. Battlefield Portal is definitely one of the most positive things that happened in Battlefield 2042. Just in Battlefield franchise in general, Battlefield Portal is such an amazing thing we've been asking for many, many years, and we finally got it. It's kind of sad that it's not getting the support it needs. But but I know that developers, know all, they read the feedback, they read the comments and everything. They know what's happening with the Battlefield community, and they definitely realize that Battlefield Portal is an amazing tool, an amazing thing to have in a Battlefield game. Actually, it should be an entirely different game. Just Battlefield Portal, that can be a game by itself. So I have a feeling, that's my hot take, that Battlefield Portal will be the next game. That maybe it's not going to be the next game, but it will have such a big part in the next upcoming game. It will be hard to ignore Battlefield Portal because it will be the next game. Like it will have such a big impact on the next game. Like it will be it. That's going to be it. I know it's kind of hard, like the way I'm describing is really confusing maybe sometimes, but the way is just that I think it's going to be such an important part of the next game. They realize that they rather improve it for the next game than give it for this game, because Battlefield 2042 is already a lost cause. So what's the point giving all the support if we can add all that good stuff for the next game? It will, and of course it will push sales and push pre-orders and so on. Living in London is just quite something with your, beeping and police sirens and rain and everything. Oh my god. Of course, another positive is it's kind of outside the game, but Battlefield Podcast, the official Battlefield podcast that they do right now, it's really scripted in a sense, because it's not like a weekly thing. They talk about, random stuff that is happening with their studio or the game itself, But the official Battlefield podcast that they release on Spotify, iTunes, and so on, I listened to those episodes, that podcast, and it's such a good podcast. Just because it gives you a different insight about the game and how DICE developers are working, how they have to deal with certain problems, and they explain how they deal with those problems. And it's such a good podcast that basically makes the game feel bigger, because the context, what they had to deal with. The context, what kind of problems they have to fix, how they think about fixing the game and designing the game, redesigning the maps or adding new maps, whatever the case may be. They explain from their point of view how game development works for Battlefield 2042, and I hope they will continue with this podcast and will continue doing more updates, more explaining, more actual education towards the Battlefield community, so they can understand what it takes to make a video game to be functional in the first place. Making video games is not easy. So it's nice to know that developers come on the podcast. They talk about certain stuff that it's not really discussed anywhere else, And I've been a big advocate of developers and publishers coming to the public, to the player base or wherever that may be, not shareholders, but the player base, and just basically explain the situation that is happening with the games. So we have this problem that you all complain about, and this is how we try to address it. But for it to address it, we need to do this and that, but we can't do that. They basically just explain, just educate your player base, explain what game development is, because every time you read, any negative feedback about any game, and they basically telling developers to do that and that and that, but the reason they say that, the player base are saying that, is because the developers already did that. They tried to do that, it did not work. But only developers know that. The player base doesn't know that. And then of course they say that in their feedback, in the negative feedback about, X game, and they explain why didn't you do that. And no publisher or developer comes in and say, well, we didn't do that because X or Y or whatever that may be. They never explain that, and that's why you have a lot of energetic, people that not really educate with the gaming industry. They don't understand what it takes to make these games. And developers and publishers do not speak to developers, or developers do not speak to the player base regarding any of that because NDAs or management says no. Like, I heard so many horrible stories how certain management people and certain developers influence content creators, for example. There was one content creator, I will not mention names, there was one content creator that talked about something about Battlefield in a negative way, but in a respectful way. He wasn't like a dipshit. No. He was a respectful, it was a respectful negative criticism about something. And not even criticism. It was something from a... Okay, now I remember. Now I remember the whole story. Wait. Oh. Sorry, I just had a drink. I've been talking for a while. So the story was basically, there was this developer that was working on Battlefield 2042. And he wrote an article. I think it was like his personal website or something like that. And he explained what the problems they had with Battlefield 2042 marketing and what problems they had to deal with. And then he explained how he dealt with those problems, And it was honest self-review. Like, we had these problems, we had to fix them, and that's how we fixed them. And it was really insightful. It was really educational. And one of the content creators, who's friend with that developer, explained, like, yeah, what happened and blah, blah, blah. And it was really educational, and it's not... Game development is not, it's not perfect, releasing a big-ass product like that is not... It's never going to be easy. You're going to have problems. So it was really insightful and really important for that developer to come out and just say, yeah, these are the problems we had, and this is how we dealt with them. And it was fantastic. It was perfect. And it gave a lot, I know a lot of people took a different perspective. Like, they learned something from that. And we need more of that. But what happened was certain executives, or I can't remember if it was an executive, saw that, and he basically put that developer in, like the boss, he put that developer into trouble. He for some reason, that developer got in trouble for being honest about the problems they had to deal with, just being honest about his work, educating people about their, about what he does. And the boss had a really big problem with that because it showcases that management is a bunch of morons, a bunch of idiots, or management is not perfect either. They also have their own problems to deal with. And that boss had such a big problem that because he thought it shows that they're weak or showcases their weaknesses. And that developer got in trouble and demanded for that developer to remove his article from his personal website. And that developer asked the content creator to change the title of that particular video because it was negative. I'm sorry, what the fuck? So that tells you what kind of influence management can have on content creators. And this is why it's important to have this education. But management doesn't allow to have this education for the player base. And I've been a big advocate having this type of education for the player base because they have to understand what it takes to make these games. And management doesn't allow it. So Battlefield 1 podcast being up, on Spotify and, iTunes or wherever, and you can listen to this podcast and hear the comments, hear the opinions and, just the actual just to like they're just explaining what it takes to make a video game and what kind of problems they had to deal with. It's like it's important. This is education, and I'm really glad that this Battlefield podcast is up and it's available for everyone to listen. So that's definitely one of the big positives outside the game itself. So I hope they're gonna continue with that, and it's not just gonna be like, oh, we do 10 episodes and call it a day. I hope they're gonna continue as time goes on, because we really need that. What else we can talk about positives? People are also praising that Battlefield 2042 cosmetics what's the word? They're not going too crazy with their cosmetics, which is funny until now, because just was a couple of days ago they released screenshots of the new mid-season event that is gonna happen in Battlefield 2042, and the characters, the soldiers, have like some sort of masks on them, something like that. It's like it has, they're really green. It has colors like some anonymous mask or lizard mask or whatever they may be. Like it's more outgoing skins, and people lost their shit. They act like the skin did not look anything crazy. Did it look expressive? Yeah, of course. But people lost their shit because of that. They're like, oh, Battlefield is not going to... Here's the thing. Even with those skins, Battlefield 2042 did not go too crazy with their skins, with their cosmetics and everything for the soldiers. And I'm okay with that. I don't have an opinion. I don't really mind if they add something really ridiculous and stupid, In a sense, I kind of agree that Battlefield maybe should remain somewhat semi-realistic or semi-authentic with their, skins and everything. But there's nothing wrong going a bit, outside the norm. There's nothing wrong with an anime skin somewhere, for example, a picture on the tank. What's wrong with an anime girl on a tank? I see nothing wrong with that. I think that's perfectly reasonable, because anime, for example, these days is the modern pin art. Back in World War II days, soldiers put a lot of, different pin arts, of beautiful women on their tanks, guns, vehicles, whatever that may be. And these days, it's not beautiful women, it's anime, and memes. So I see nothing unusual having an anime girl on a tank or a weapon skin, whatever, having a sticker on the web. I see nothing wrong with that. I think that's perfectly normal to this generation of soldiers, For example, look at Ukraine war, How many, we've seen a pilot, with a Santa Claus costume, killing Russians. That happened. Then we saw a Ukrainian soldier wearing cat ears. That happened. So how's that different in a game? So for some reason people expect the Battlefield soldiers, or like Battlefield community for some reason expects that all soldiers are serious and everything. I don't understand what's the problem with a bit more color in your character skins. Well, but that's not the point. I'm not going to talk about skins, because I can have this conversation for hours. Actually, it should be the next episode. I should talk about the skins in general, because I think it can be a really interesting conversation we can have regarding that. But yeah, that's so. Even though I'm not a big fan of Battlefield 2042, I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not a fan of the gunplay. I'm not a fan of the movement. I'm not a fan of the specialist, even though it's classes now, but they're still specialists, And I'm not really a fan of that. But it did a lot of things right in certain cases, and it's nice to know that there's some positives in there, and I hope they can, push some of these positives to the next game, and the next game is not going to be like a completely 180 regarding certain features and everything. I hope they're not doing everything from scratch and just like whatever the case may be. I hope some of these positives will stay for the next game. Of course, we don't know what the next game is, we need context. But for example, buying individual items from bundles is a really good thing, and I hope that that will be there for the next game. If the next game is selling skins, whatever, I hope that's gonna be an outgoing feature that will stay in the next game. So that's regarding positives. Negatives, I can talk about the negatives for a really long time, but I don't think I want to, just because if you listen to this podcast, there's a big chance that you're a big Battlefield fan. You already know what happened with Battlefield 2042. You know what happened with this whole franchise. You've probably been playing this franchise for a really long time. So you probably know the history of Battlefield 1, you know the history of Battlefield 5, you know the history of Battlefield 2042, and you probably know the history of other games. And you know how they have been portrayed by the Battlefield community. So I will not talk about the negatives that much because you already know the negatives. It was a horrible launch. Specialists were such a bad idea. Maps were really bad when it came out. Of course, I mentioned the one negative from my personal view. It's like, I'm glad we're getting map remakes. They taken the vanilla maps, the maps that came out originally, and they're remaking them. They're improving them, and they improving each map with each season. I think it's 2 maps per season or something like that. So that's great. I like that. That's one of the amazing things ever. But they do push that thing as content. And that's where the PC Gaming article comes in. Yeah, the game is really good now. But is it though? It's just basically fixing the the game. When the game came out, the maps were really horrible. The worst maps that any Battlefield game ever had. Worst maps. These are the worst maps you could ever play on. And they've been fixing those maps, and they've been promoting that as some sort of content for the season, which is not really good in my eyes. Is that content? It's not really content. It's just you're just fixing your shit, and I don't think that should be pushed as content. But I understand why it's being pushed as content. For example, people say, "Oh, we need more maps," for Battlefield 2042. I agree. But you don't have unlimited resources to make those maps. So developers, what dies, they had to decide, do we remake the old maps or do we make more new ones? And it was a tough decision, I can imagine, to make, because they had to choose, because you don't have unlimited resources you don't have the resources to make new maps and redesign the old ones. Now, you might be thinking, why they don't have the resources? That's a different story, because I can talk about this forever, but the thing is, the fact is, they don't have unlimited resources to make, all these, changes in this content, so they had to choose. So I understand why they chose to remake the old maps, to fix the old maps, and maybe produce 1 map each season. Is it enough? No. But I understand the decision, and I think they made the right decision. Because the way the maps were working, how the maps played when the game came out, it was a really, really horrible experience. And if, let's say, they will be adding 2 maps per season, 2 new maps per season instead of adding 1 remake and 1 new one, we will still have to deal with the old shitty maps in the mix with the new maps that definitely are better than the old ones. But because the old maps are being redesigned, suddenly I don't hate that much. I don't have to go out of matchmaking as soon as I realize it's a really bad map. Now I know it's because that map was remade and it got improved. I can stay on the server, play this old map, and then I can play the new map in the next match. So I'm glad they did that. Yeah, it's really shitty that the game came out in a really shitty, state, in a really bad state. And they had to remake these maps, they had to improve these maps in the first place. It's really shitty that they had to do that in the first place, but I'm glad it happened, in a sense, just because, well, you learned your lesson, you improved, on your work, and I hope you will take those lessons for the next game. And now you know how to make good big maps for 128 players, without destroying the performance of the game. So it's quite amazing that this game runs on PS4 and Xbox One. Like, damn, you're running this game on a 10-year-old hardware. It's quite fascinating. But yeah, so I can talk about the negatives for many, many hours, but there's no point because you already know. So overall, I'm glad the game is being fixed. I'm glad the game is being improved. I'm kind of sad that Season 5 will be the last proper update for this game. Although, granted, we can be surprised. It might be they might be like Season 6 and Season 7 and so on, but I kind of doubt it. So I'm just glad that this game will be left behind in somewhat decent state. And the remaining developers that have been working on this game, they can finally move to the next game. And hopefully, whenever the next game is, they learn their lessons with Battlefield 2042, and they will apply those lessons for the next game. And hopefully, the next game will have a smooth, amazing, decent launch. With a good number of maps, classes, and a team, the aesthetics, whatever you want to call it, that makes sense for the Battlefield game. My biggest gripe with Battlefield 2042, I've been asking for a game like Battlefield 2042 for, since Battlefield 4. I've been asking for that kind of game for like forever, like 8 years now. Almost 10 years, 9 years since Battlefield 4 came out. I've been asking for that kind of game forever. And when it finally came out, the cinematics were amazing. The trailers were amazing. The Exodus short movie was amazing. So that's like the team I've been always, asking for in a Battlefield game. And when the game came out, it was a completely different story. It was like completely different team, completely different aesthetics. It's like, it just did not make sense. This is one of the rare moments where the marketing of the game was so much better than the actual game. Actually, it's not that rare, but it's just like the game itself was completely different from the marketing, and that pisses me off. But again, like I said, I'm really glad that the game is being improved. A lot of things are being fixed. I have a feeling the next season of Battlefield 2042, which is Season 5, will be really amazing. I have a feeling developers will do their best. I have a feeling they want to do their best for this one update, for this particular season. They want to, finish the game with a bang. They want to, go out, they want to move to the next game saying, yeah, we made Battlefield 2042 an amazing game now. And we can move on to the next game, and we can make the next game be equally amazing, if not better. Now, of course, I don't think there's anything that will make me like Battlefield 2042. I really do not like this game. It's just no matter how much I force myself to like it, no matter how many changes they do, no matter how many improvements they make, I just do not enjoy the game itself. It's the core of the game. And the problem is they will not fix the core of the game because it's the core, and they don't have the resources to fix the core of the game. Introducing classes was a good step. It was a step in the right direction, but at the end of the day, it was just a band-aid to the bigger problem. Do classes make the game feel a bit better? Yes, it does. But does it fix the game? Does it make the game really fun and enjoyable? No, it's still the same game. It just fixes certain annoyances, and it's not that annoying to deal with. And I will not like this game. I will never like this game for many different reasons until they address the core problems, of the game, the actual pillars of the game. But they won't, because there's no resources and they have to work on the next game. So, it's a lost cause. So I hope the next update, I kind of feel like it's going to be a good update. The next season of Battlefield 2042 will be good, because developers will put all their effort to make sure that the game is left behind in a really good, decent, respectable state, which will encourage people to be more brave for their pre-orders, to put a pre-order for the next game when the next game is announced. Of course, a lot of people are not like that. They remember that Battlefield 2042 came out in a really shitty state, and just because you fix the game doesn't mean the next game will be this, equally, it doesn't mean it's going to be good. All we know is going to be another Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 2042 release, shit performance, like lack of features and all that kind of stuff. It's just, yeah. I've been talking for like 57 minutes right now. So overall, if you're still listening, thank you. All I'm gonna say is this, that the state of Battlefield right now is, it's not a complete disaster, but it's not good. You need the next game to produce. You need the next game to be good. You actually need the next game to be good. Otherwise, they will be hell let loose. It's just, Battlefield has been underperforming since Battlefield 1. It's like, I already mentioned in the previous podcast, in the previous episode of this podcast, Battlefield 1 was the start of the degradation of the franchise. Battlefield 1 was a good game, but it was missing a lot of features. It was like, it was certain stuff that was not good. Even though it's a good game, it aged well, but Battlefield 1 was the start of the degradation of this franchise, because it did a couple of things really wrong, and those couple of wrongs are really big. So that was the start. Then Battlefield 5 came out, which was a complete nonsense. I hate that game so much. It's just like, it did some things right, but it was like, God, I hated that game so much for multiple reasons. And people right now praise Battlefield 5 like it's a really good game. Yeah, compared to Battlefield 2042, sure. sure, but no. And of course, Battlefield 2042, as it came out, it was the worst thing that ever happened in the Battlefield franchise. I'm sorry, it definitely is. It was definitely the worst thing that ever happened. But I'm glad they stick with it, and they're fixing it, they're improving it. They actually did that unbelievable, and they're actually redesigning the old maps that got launched, which is fantastic. But yeah, I don't know what to expect for the next game. I actually don't know. Right now, if you ask me if I really, enjoy Battlefield, no. Battlefield right now, to me, is in a state that I do not care. I just do not care. So every time I read something about Battlefield, I just do not care. I just don't. And I think that's the ultimate state of Battlefield right now. Just like, that's the actual state of Battlefield. I don't think anyone cares. I'm glad, for example, it got a new player base from being free on PlayStation Plus for a whole month. But when that happens, this is just basically confirms that Season 5 will be the last, proper season for this game. That's it. So that was it. Because they did that with Battlefront 2, they did with other games. When the game becomes free on a big console, big platform like Sony, like PlayStation, your days are numbered. This is just the last ditch of gathering some remaining money you can get from new players buying cosmetics. This is just one last push to get some money out. Make some money out of it. which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is it. Battlefield 2042 Season 5 is it. And whatever they're gonna do with that game, with that update for this game, is gonna be it. And I have a feeling it's gonna be a good update. As I said, developers want to come out swinging, saying, this is it, we fixed the game, and now we can move on to the next one. We'll see. But overall, I just don't care about Battlefield right now. Even though I still love the franchise. I love the games. I love the formula of Battlefield. But there's so many things they did wrong. It just rubs me so wrong in so many ways. I just don't care. I just don't. I know it's a really sad note to end the podcast on, like this episode, end this podcast on. It's just, I don't care. It's not important. Well, and until then, we'll see. So, thank you guys for listening, for my ramblings. Thank you to listening to my, I don't know what to call this, a discussion, I guess. Wherever they may be. Please do, please follow me on my socials. Follow us on the BattlefieldOne Podcast Twitter, or follow me on Twitter, or find my YouTube, wherever that may be. Contact me. There's ways to contact me. Please do give me feedback, what you think about the podcast, what you think about this format and what all that kind of stuff. Just let me know. I'm really interested in everything you have to say. And if you do want to support the podcast, check out, patreon.com/TheLankySoldier for that extra content and get that early access to the show by a whole week. And so that's kind of it. So thank you guys for listening. My name is Tom, aka TheLankySoldier. I can't speak, I've been talking for a while. So basically, my name is Tom, aka TheLankySoldier. And I'll see you guys in the next one. I'll see you guys on the battlefield.